We have just recently seen how the UAE pledged to net zero and how this entire initiative can be done by just one-time plantation.
Welcome to the Sustainability Action Podcast, an initiative from the Capital Club Dubai. My name is Pedro Pereira. I am the lead of the Sustainability Action Society in the UAE. This podcast is about making sustainability as part of your business.
My name is Nadia Boumeziut. I'm an advisory board member of the Sustainability Action Society at the Capital Club Dubai. Today's episode is about how Arshi Ayub Mohammed, CEO of Trusted Trade Group, is using innovation in carbon sequestration to plant bamboo in the UAE and lead businesses to net zero.
Well, let's deep dive into this episode. And remember, we are the voice of sustainability. Very good, here we are. Our guest for the day is so special, everybody. What do you think, Nadia?
Yes, fantastic. I'm very excited.
Well, our guest today is known for many things. And, good for the humanity is one of them. But I want to start by asking you a very specific question. When I see your profile, it talks about you being an advisory for royal families. How is that? How you become an advisor for royal families?
Well, firstly, I think I want to thank you, Nadia, Capital Club. It's wonderful to be here speaking with both of you. One of the things that I'm extremely proud of is the leadership of this country. They are extremely passionate about certain things. One of the things being sustainable living and quality of living for people, for everybody, whoever is in the country, be it the citizens, be it the residents, everybody. My role is a very, very small role. I come in a capacity wherein I speak about sustainability and advanced sciences and how technology can be this fantastic enabler in order to do and achieve all our goals. So it's a very small capacity, but in my way, I think there's a lot that we can do together as humanity.
That's exciting.
Yes, and I fully agree with you. Like, I also believe that technology is a great enabler, and when it comes to sustainability, it can actually help us advance a lot of the causes. So today, we would like to talk to you about your new passion project, which is Oxygenate Bamboo. And could you tell us a little bit more about that? And how did it start? How did you get introduced to it? And how did it become such an important project for you?
Well, I'll take you back a lot many years ago. I've seen my mother do hydroponics in our kitchen. I've seen her grow a lot of things in our backyard. So I come from a family wherein my mom always focused on greenery, plants, and how she would do it herself without any kind of assistance. So coming from that, we started directing our efforts into sustainable practices a lot many years ago. And we realized that sometimes the actual solutions may be very simple, but they just require a very simple modification. We did that with the bamboo and how specific fertile clones can really ensure that we create this natural carbon sink. Because carbon sequestration generally also happens with a lot many specific kind of plants. But in order to accelerate carbon control, modification in its genetic and tissue culture is very important. We started focusing on this and developed this specific kind of clone, which is not just about climatic change, but also about how bamboo can be utilized for energy, which is an extreme important component in the UAE national strategy. Bamboo for climate change, bamboo for energy, bamboo for waste management, and very important, bamboo for everyday use products. Because not only do we create a very massive change, but then also the entire model of a circular economy, the end-to-end usages of bamboo through a one-time plantation. Now, when I say one-time plantation is because this clone is thornless. It doesn't require to be replanted. And it grows in the capacity of 1.5 feet per day. So you naturally have to, yes, per day. So you naturally have to cut it in a couple of months. When it comes to its complete growth in about 2 years, we are able to create massive amount of energy, whether it is CNG, whether it's fuel, electricity, ethanol, all products that every economy imports and exports in heavy quantities. With the amount of modification in the gene and the tissue culture, we can control 3 to 4 times more carbon and emit oxygen. Sunlight is extremely important for this clone to thrive. And I think with this climate, now we're touching upon the Middle East very heavily, and of course UAE being our first priority with the agenda for net zero, this specific clone comes at a very, very, if I may say, economically low cost advantage to any company, public sector, private sector. And with bamboo, it is such an underrated clone. I feel that not enough is spoken about it, and the usages can be massive. So that's where we started our drive with the cultivation of bamboo, working upon oxygen parks, because remember, as a species, we do require massive amounts of oxygen in order to combat the carbon in the atmosphere. On an average, a human requires around 280 kgs of oxygen annually. One bamboo tree gives you more than 300 kgs of oxygen to breathe. So I think health, environmental, food security, industrial, and finally as a species, we require these things to be in our more mainstream landscape. So that's where the entire vision for Oxygenate comes from.
Very interesting. I wasn't actually aware that bamboo can be used for so many things. So, and you're planting this here in the UAE. Is this climate actually able, I mean, is this possible in the UAE?
Let's be honest, we are in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, like bamboo requires water.
Planting bamboos in the desert? Can you give us a picture of how that happens? You know, what's the process? Where in this atmosphere that can work?
Well, we do intend to start this now in the UAE. As you said, with this kind of temperature and with scarcity of water, we do understand that there might be limitations to cultivating any plant. Forget about the bamboo. We require limitations. However, we did some experiments and noticed that this clone actually thrives in wilder circumstances. When it comes to the quantity of water required, fortunately, we can use any kind of water, except seawater. We can use wastewater, nuclear water, industrial water. Any kind of used water can be diverted to cultivating this bamboo. And we intend to create bamboo deserts. We don't intend to just keep it greening the landscape as an entire huge vision for us. And of course, in alignment with the leadership of the country. We have just recently seen how the UAE pledged to net zero and how this entire initiative can be done by just one-time plantation. It's not a continuous more like a plantation recultivation. No, we don't need to do that. It's a single-time plantation. The only thing it does is benefit us completely.
And in terms of carbon sequestration, how is it different from other trees? Like, how does it compare in terms of the amount of carbon that it can actually sequester?
Fortunately, with the modification, that's where you can say that bamboo is actually the new disruptive technology that we can proudly call it to be. With the modification of the tissue culture in gene, this is how we are able to sequester a massive carbon. This is simple science in biotechnology, and I think with the research conducted with our chief scientist for, I think, more than 40 years of biotechnology research has led to this kind of a modification. But do realize that this is a simple solution. It is a plant that was modified in its gene, and this can actually be implemented massively in order to have our vision for humanity in general, to be able to control carbon, and realistically. Because remember, we cannot cut down industrial activity. We can find efficient ways of doing it, but we cannot completely cut it down. At the same time, we can plant more and more bamboo trees in order to offset the carbon emission. That is practical. That is realistic.
So how does it align to your other business lines? I know you're the CEO of Trust of Trade Group, and how does it align with all the other verticals that you have within your business?
We are extremely entrenched into mining and manufacturing activities. One portion of our work understands, and we work very heavily with the Abu Dhabi National Oil as suppliers and with the different number of companies locally. We do understand that industrial activity cannot practically halt. At the same time, as miners of coal, bauxite, and a couple of other minerals, we do understand that natural resources have this immense value. And as traders of so many commodities, we see massive opportunities for ethanol, for activated charcoal, for CNG, for fuel, to be able to be traded in so many different verticals. Sustainable practices just come to us as a human. We never saw this project to be this massive money spinner or a very, but let me tell you, over the years that we have developed, climatic projects and companies and technologies will actually be the next Google, the next Microsoft, the next Tesla. Because this is where we are going as a civilization. This is where we see massive future for our upcoming, I think, kids and generations and the youth. They are focused on making change.
So you mentioned earlier the UAE vision and net zero commitment. How does your organization align to that, and how do you feel like you can also be a voice in showing other businesses how it can be done?
We do see creation of natural carbon sinks to be essential for food security, for sustainable impact in industry, manufacturing, waste management, because remember, we are diverting so much of wastewater that cannot be recycled, or a certain component cannot be recycled. And finally, to create products, an entire model of green economy which is circular. I'd like to mention that when you cultivate these clones in 4-feet trenches, you are actually eliminating the need for a greenhouse cover, because remember, bamboo is a natural air conditioner. It curtails minimum 7 to 9 degrees of temperature. So we actually don't need to spend the amount of money that we are doing in order to cultivate plants, in order to cultivate fruits, vegetables, any kind of breeding for animals as well. So we intend to relay this knowledge. We want to work with organizations and understand the benefit as an organization. You don't just satisfy your individual responsibility, but also create massive opportunities for carbon trading as an organization. Mostly organizations are commercial driven. They do understand that they have a responsibility, but then creation of carbon certificates is also extremely important as of today in order to trade. As manufacturers, we know that in order to buy certain chemicals, certain components, you do require carbon certificates globally. And in order to do that, you need to have your own ways, your own initiatives. Major oil companies, major industries, and I think companies in general can utilize this. As a family, if you plant 3 bamboos in your backyard, I think you are sorted for oxygen for the rest of your life.
I'm thinking your customers benefit a lot of working with you because you help them reduce their impact, you help them manage their emissions effectively. So that's great. So your scope 1 and 2 emissions becomes the scope 3 emissions of your customers. I'm interested to know, how do you embed sustainability in your own business? How you handle your suppliers and your business processes to make your entire operation decarbonized?
Well, like I said, we are into heavy industry for a very long time now. And we understand that, for example, I'll give you a very specific example. You do know that when you undertake mining operations, there is a lot of soil and the water table that you end up diminishing by that process, by the virtue of the mining process itself. So we started putting the bamboo trees into the mining area. And let me tell you, it was just an experiment to see in a way that how can we sort of retain this entire landscape and the resourceful landscape that we just ended up mining. It actually did wonders to that entire land table. And that's when we realized that mining areas, heavily, if I may say, arid areas, these entire landscapes could really be transformed by the virtue of single plantations. Precision farming, and understanding that this thing can really, if I may say, impact the entire way we are working. So in terms of our entire supply chain, let me tell you, we may not be the best people in terms of how the sustainable industry work, but we do understand that divesting a part of our funds, part of our funding specifically, can really change a lot of things. For example, now we have started using the bamboo trash in order to create sustainable fabrics. We started to use for construction materials. These are the traditional uses of bamboo. But remember, we can also create CNG fuel by the virtue of bamboo itself. So for example, 4 kg of bamboo can create 1 kg of CNG, compressed natural gas. So we do understand that our core and traditional operations may not be that sustainable, may not be that efficient as we may want them to be, but we do understand that it is our responsibility to start working in different categories that may have direct and indirect impact on our environment specifically.
If I may just take you back to the UAE vision and the energy outlook 2050, net zero 2050, do you think that's a realistic goal?
With oxygenate, it's 100% realistic. If we cultivate, we did a small experiment and we did a small study in order to see that if we start cultivating 100,000 acres annually for oxygenate bamboo, we can actually become carbon neutral in the next 11 years. We don't require it to be 2050, but that needs to start tomorrow. So it is a solution that could drive massive change, achieve your international goals, and benefit you as humanity.
So how can people, individuals and businesses get involved in oxygenate bamboo and possibly partner up with you or just find out more and align with your vision? How can
and to add to that, the government, how also the government can be part of that context?
So there are a couple of ways alongside how this can work. In a more we will go government and then institutional, organizational. So for example, with the government, creation of carbon free or carbon neutral freeways is extremely important. Remember, we have spaces on both sides of the freeways. We have industrial pockets that are having massive carbon emission. Those are the areas that we need to target in order to cultivate these spaces. On a minimum, I would suggest every parcel should have minimum 10 acres in order to see how much carbon we can control. Because remember, the carbon that we sequester from the freeways, the industry and the residential will be different on account of the entire atmosphere. So by that time, we are able to see massive growth in about 6 to 7 months. Ethanol can actually be extracted within 6 to 8 months. So running this from the government side as a mere, if I may say, in a more realistic way, to run this as a project which is for massive research and development. Because the way we do this will actually create a white paper. Will be able to give us the information on how much carbon we control, how much oxygen we emit, the amount of air pollution that we are able to control, the amount of water pollution we are able to control, the noise pollution we are able to control, and finally the sandstorms that we can curb. So I think this would be, in a more governmental standpoint, it's important, this is my personal opinion, that we should run this in conjunction with the universities, with local students, international students, with oxygenate, and then finally with the federal authority in order to get the statistics on how much we are able to do at the end of 6 to 8 months. Because remember, our saplings are 1 month old, 3 month old, and also 6 month old, in order to have different researches being determined in the amount of carbon we are able to control. On a more governmental side, this is how I see it culminating. From an organizational standpoint, I think it's very important to know that whether you are a predominantly oil company or not, that doesn't matter in order for you to offset carbon. As a company, we have a responsibility. And to be able to do that, running bamboo drives, creating pockets of cultivating bamboo is extremely important, because we are nurturing so many different industries. We are creating industry, we are also working on food security, we are working on waste management. So that encapsulates your entire agenda for social responsibility, because you end up creating employment, you end up advancing economic prosperity, and finally you end up being affected as a human. Because remember, cultivating a plantation or planting a tree will give you massive health benefits as well. So as a human being, you benefit, as a company you benefit, and you help put down your foot in terms of how the nation can prosper, your economic advancement, and how you can contribute to that as a company. So I think that's where I see the division. And on an individual side, start planting bamboos in your backyard.
Brilliant. I love it. That's fantastic.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you.